I found out through an Instagram story. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a forwarded listing. Just a grainy video of my younger sister Grace, standing in the living room of her new home, clapping her hands like a child on Christmas morning, while Dad filmed and Mom squealed in the background. The caption read, "She deserves this so much. First home, family blessings." I watched it 3 times, frozen, trying to match the caption to the reality. Deserve what? A house? A house? With whose money? It had always been known, quietly, in the kind of way that isn't bragged about, that my college fund was secured. It was the only thing I'd clung to as life at home started to twist around Grace. She was the golden one, the mistake eraser. When I got a 3.8 GPA, they barely glanced. When she scraped a 2.1, she got a cake. My parents had started the fund when I was 10. I used to hear them talk about it proudly. How I'd be the first to go to college. How they'd protect that money no matter what. And I never touched it. Not even when we couldn't afford new clothes. I saved, worked summers, took on part-time, jobs through high school. Because I believed in the plan. That belief unraveled with a single phone call 3 days later. "Hey, sweetie," Mom chirped when I answered. Her voice sounded sticky, like she'd coated it in syrup. "Hi," I said, monotone. "Did you see Grace's post?" "Oh, isn't it wonderful?" I swallowed. "Where did the money come from?" A pause. Then, too casually, "Well, we talked about it. You weren't planning to go this year, and she's pregnant now, and, well, she needed a place for the baby." My jaw locked. "Excuse me?" "She's your sister. And we figured, since you deferred and were just working." I cut her off. "I deferred because of Dad's job loss. Because you said we needed a year to regroup." "And we did, sweetie, we really did. You helped. But Grace, she's starting a family now. That's a different kind of need." I hung up, not out of rudeness, out of disbelief. I stared at my reflection in the blank phone screen. I looked normal, like I should still be okay. But I wasn't. They stole it. They didn't say they did. They wrapped it in family and sacrifice. And you're the strong one, but they took the only thing that was mine. For Grace. Always Grace. The next week, Mom sent a message in the family group chat. "Hey, darling. Grace needs a few hours to herself this weekend. Would you mind coming over to babysit?" Babysit. Babysit in the house they bought with my future. I didn't respond. Not because I was done, but because I was just getting started. I didn't answer their message. Not that weekend. Not the next one either. I just let the chat bubble stay unread, left them hanging in the shallow void of delivered. But my silence wasn't out of confusion anymore. It was strategy. Grace texted me separately. 2 days later, "Hey, you okay? Mom said you seemed upset." I didn't reply. 3 dots flickered, then nothing. A week passed, and then a card came in the mail. Not a text, not a call. A card. It was pink and flowery, with a glittery baby carriage on the front. Inside, written in Mom's handwriting, "Auntie Ivy, we hope you'll come to the baby shower. Love, Grace and baby." Tucked inside, a registry link and a handwritten postscript. "Maybe you could pitch in for the stroller? We're getting the Bugaboo Pinu 50, but it lasts years." I almost laughed. I didn't go. Instead, I worked a double shift at the bookstore and used the tips to buy myself a pair of noise-canceling headphones. When my boss asked if I wanted Sundays off, for family stuff, I told her, "No thanks. Family's just complicated right now." She didn't ask again. Months passed. Grace posted more. Maternity photos with staged flower crowns and edited filters, aesthetic meal prep kits, the nursery wall painted sage green. Every inch of the house turned into content, her mommy era. The caption that finally pushed me past the edge wasn't even the worst one. It just said, "From college dropout to homeowner to mommy, God always provides." And the comments were full of claps and praise hands and inspiration girl. Not a single person asked how, because nobody ever thinks to ask how people like Grace get what they have. I started collecting receipts, not literal ones, but proof, screenshots of texts, copies of my bank statements from the past 5 years, where I'd transferred emergency rent and help with groceries, and just until tax season funds into my parents' account. Every digital trail that showed I had kept them afloat when Dad's hours got cut and when Mom said she might lose the house. And most importantly, one email from my high school counselor dated 2 years ago, confirming the 529 college savings account was in my name. That fund didn't just belong to the family, it was legally mine. And even though it had been emptied out last year, I wasn't about to let them act like it never existed. That was when I messaged Grace. Me. Congrats on the baby. I'm glad you got the house. Her. Thanks, it's been a dream come true. Me. Can I come by? Just want to drop something off. Her. Of course. Come anytime. Bring snacks. Lol. She didn't know I had requested an appointment at the financial aid office that same week. She didn't know I had a copy of the fund's original ownership document, or that I'd pulled up the records showing the exact date it had been liquidated. She didn't know that I had already spoken to a quiet, calm, and very interested lawyer who specialized in family misuse of custodial accounts. But I wasn't coming to fight. Not yet. I was coming to watch her lie to my face. Because that's how you know who someone really is. The front door swung open, and Grace stood there in fuzzy socks and a milk-stained hoodie, cradling a baby on her shoulder. The living room smelled like lavender and overpriced air freshener. Ivy. Oh, say hi to Auntie. The baby drooled on her shirt. Grace beamed like she'd never committed theft in her life. I walked in slowly, eyes scanning the house. Hardwood floors, designer couch, a minimalist high chair that probably cost more than my first laptop. "So," I said, setting down the folder I'd brought. "Nice place," she smiled. "It's been such a blessing. Honestly, we never thought it would happen this fast." I nodded, letting the silence stretch just a second too long. "Grace," I said, "how'd you guys afford this?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" I leaned in slightly. "The down payment. You didn't work. You were still on Mom and Dad's insurance. So, where did it come from?" Her face twitched. Then the performance began. "Oh, well, it was a family decision, you know. Mom and Dad had some money set aside, and they said it was time to prioritize the next chapter." My voice didn't change. "The college fund. My fund. Her." Smile faltered. "Well, technically it was the family's money." "No, it was in my name, Grace." A long, loaded pause filled the air. And then, the moment I was waiting for. "Well, Ivy, it's not like you were even using it." That was all I needed to hear. I stood up slowly, smiled back at her, and picked up the unopened envelope I'd brought. Inside was a copy of the lawyer's letter. I didn't give it to her yet. but I wanted her to see the name on the return address, just once, before it all began. Grace didn't ask what the envelope was, not directly, but her eyes flicked to it every time I shifted in my seat. She tried to hide it, pretending to bounce the baby in rhythm while talking about organic baby food and how hard it was to be a young mom, but she kept glancing at that envelope like it might hiss. Good. I waited until the baby started crying, sharp and sudden, like a warning bell. She stood to rock him. I should go, I said, gently folding the envelope and slipping it back into my bag. Grace's lips were tight. So, you're mad. I paused by the door. I'm aware. Not mad. She forced a laugh. Well, don't. Go do anything drastic. It's just money, right? You'll go back next year. I turned slowly, and I said with a smile, It's not just money. It was mine. Then I left. Back in my tiny studio apartment, I opened my laptop and pulled up the documentation again, making sure I had every thread secured, every timestamp, every bank movement, every signature. Then I emailed all of it to Sophia, the lawyer. She'd been calm from the beginning, never shocked. This wasn't new to her. Families raiding college funds, treating their children's futures like safety nets for their preferred child. Are you sure you want to file this formally? She had asked last week. I'm not trying to bankrupt them, I'd replied. I just want it known. I want the silence broken. Sophia had smiled faintly. Sometimes exposure is more painful than repayment. That Friday, she filed the formal notice. Within 72 hours, my parents received the first letter, intent to investigate misuse of custodial education funds, account ending in 2035. I heard from my father before anyone else. A number I hadn't seen flash across my screen in months. Dad, missed call. Dad, voicemail. Ivy, your mother's in tears. What is this? A lawsuit? Can we not just talk like a family? I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Sophia, then Mom called, 3 times in a row. Her final voicemail was the one that stung, not because it hurt, but because it was so expected. Ivy, how could you do this to your sister? She's already struggling. That money was for all of us. We gave you a roof, food, rides to school. Doesn't that count for something? I replayed that line over and over. Doesn't that count for something? Yes, it does. It counts as survival, not theft. By Monday, my aunt, Mom's older sister, texted me out of nowhere. Aunt Lisa. Ivy, I had no idea they used your fund. I am so sorry. That was not right. If you ever need to stay somewhere, my door's open. It was the first crack in the silence, and I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about pattern, about Grace always getting the best, room, the bigger piece, the second chances, while I was told to be mature, to understand, to sacrifice. This time, I wasn't sacrificing anything. Grace finally texted me 3 days later. You've ruined everything. You embarrassed Mom. I can't believe you're doing this over a few stupid dollars. You're sick. I didn't answer, but I did include that message in the file Sophia was preparing, because soon there would be mediation. And every word Grace typed was helping me build a portrait of the family scapegoat finally speaking. That Thursday, Sophia called. I have news. They've requested to settle. Already? They're scared. This could go public. Custodial misuse is serious. And you're of age now. Technically, the entire account was legally yours the moment you turned 18. I sat down on my bed. And what does settle mean? It means they'll pay it back. Likely in full. Maybe more. But we can also ask for damages, or include a public statement if that matters to you. I was quiet. Then, it does. But not because I want to shame them. I want them to admit it. A pause. I'll draft a proposal, Sophia said. And just like that, for the first time in my life, I had leverage. Not guilt, not silence, not understanding, but power. And I wasn't letting it go. The proposal was simple. Sophia had drawn it up with calm precision, devoid of emotion, but full of weight. Full reimbursement of the liquidated college fund, plus legal acknowledgement that the account was withdrawn without Ivy's consent and a formal written apology signed by both parents to be retained in legal records, not shared publicly, unless the agreement was breached. It was fair, civil, even kind. Too kind, in my opinion. But it wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about accountability. About no longer being the one who always let it go. The night before mediation, I didn't sleep. I lay on my mattress staring at the ceiling fan, watching it spin like the cycle I was finally trying to break. My phone buzzed around 2 a.m. It was a message from Grace. No emojis this time. Don't come tomorrow. Just take the money if you want it that bad. No need to humiliate everyone, I typed. Then deleted. Then typed again. I'm coming. You deserve to hear it said out loud, just like I deserved to be asked before you took everything. She left, me on red. We met in a nondescript office near downtown. Sophia beside me in a soft blue blouse. My mother across the table looking 10 years older, and my father, stone-faced, arms crossed like a toddler in timeout. Grace wasn't there. I think it's better if she stays home with the baby, Mom offered weakly. I said nothing. The mediator read the proposal aloud. Every line, no interruptions. When he finished, he slid the document forward. My parents didn't move. Then Dad leaned in. This is excessive. We're your parents. We did what we thought was best. I didn't flinch. You didn't even tell me. You hid it from me. Mom's voice cracked. We didn't want to hurt you. We thought you'd understand. You always thought that, I said, steady. When you asked me to cover the groceries, when I sold my books to pay for Grace's hospital stay, when I stayed home instead of going to orientation. A pause. I was always supposed to understand. Their silence was heavier than any yelling could have been. Sophia spoke next. Calm, sharp. This agreement allows for discretion. But Ivy reserves the right to disclose everything if payment is not made within the agreed timeline. She is not asking for emotional restitution, just financial and legal acknowledgement of the breach. My father looked like he might explode, but my mother, she just nodded. We'll sign. When the signatures were done, I stood. I want to say one last thing, I said quietly. They looked up. You didn't just take money. You took time. You took belief. And you made me feel like I was selfish for wanting anything of my own. Mom's eyes shimmered. But I'm done feeling guilty for being robbed. Then I left. By the time I got back to my apartment, the payment confirmation was already in my inbox. Sophia had transferred the first installment. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. But it felt like a beginning. A week later, Grace posted a photo of the baby's nursery again. The caption read, "Some people will always stay bitter. I stay focused on love. Grateful heart, no names, no tags, just a wound wrapped in glitter." I almost didn't reply, but I did, not online. I sent her a private message. Love isn't real if it requires theft and silence to survive. She never answered. I used part of the first installment to enroll in spring courses. I kept the rest in a new account, locked behind a password only I knew. That weekend, I walked past Grace's house on my way to the train station. She was on the porch, bouncing the baby, her phone pressed between her shoulder and ear. She saw me. I saw her. She smiled tightly. I didn't stop, but I did nod. Not out of kindness, out of recognition. This wasn't over. Not fully. But now, I wasn't the girl. They could erase. Spring came fast. The city bloomed like it had something to prove. Trees unfurling along the sidewalks and park benches reclaimed by sun-hungry strangers. It felt like waking up slowly after years of trying to convince myself I wasn't cold. Campus looked different from when I toured it as a hopeful high school senior. But maybe I was the one who'd changed. I walked in alone, with no parents beside me asking about dorms or class sizes. No Grace tagging along just to say it wasn't her thing. Just me. My bag. And a spine that had learned how to stay straight without applause. My professors didn't know the story. I liked it that way. But when we were asked to write a short essay about the cost of silence, mine had to be turned in with an extension. I couldn't stop shaking long enough to finish it on time. When I finally submitted it, the last line read, "Silence doesn't heal. It incubates. It breeds entitlement in those who mistake quiet for consent." My professor called it raw. I called it recovery. The second installment of the settlement arrived in April. It came with a 2-sentence email from my father. "We hope this closes the matter. Let's try to move forward." No apology, no warmth, no recognition that this was not just a matter, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't looking for closure from people who had none to give. Still, there was something about closure I hadn't expected. It was lonely, not painful, just hollow. Like finishing a book where no one got a happy ending, just the correct one. Grace hadn't spoken to me since the mediation, but I watched her from the sidelines, her curated life of stroller reviews and our mom life tagged selfies. The lies weren't as direct now. They were just wrapped in quotes and glitter and captions like, "People only judge you when they don't understand what you've sacrificed." Sacrificed what? My future? My education? No. Her story would always be a revision, and mine would never fit on a square post. Then one night, it happened. I was finishing a reading for political theory when I saw a new email notification from Grace. No subject line, no emojis. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Saw your essay. Mom forwarded it. I didn't know you were hurting that bad. I just thought you didn't care. That you liked being the strong one. I didn't know it came at a cost. I don't expect a response. I don't know how to fix what we broke. I just wanted you to know I read every word." And it made me cry. But not in the way I used to cry to get what I wanted. I sat, still for a while. Not angry. Not vindicated. Just still. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready. And that was okay. Sometimes healing doesn't mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means finally having the choice to walk away. That weekend, I walked past the house again. It looked the same. Green shutters, baby toys scattered across the lawn, and Grace sitting on the porch sipping something pink from a mason jar. She looked up when she saw me. This time, she didn't smile. She stood, walked down the steps, stopped in front of the gate. "Ivy," she began, voice unsure. I held up a hand. "Not here," I said. "Not yet." She nodded, just once, and I kept walking. This time, I didn't look back. But I did notice. She didn't either. May arrived, soft and golden. My days were filled with lectures, library shadows, and stolen time by the student center fountain, where people sat with headphones in and lives in motion. I blended in now, not because I disappeared, but because I belonged. It had been 6 weeks since Grace's email. I hadn't responded. And yet, I thought about it every night. Not because I doubted myself, but because it was the first time she'd ever said something that didn't orbit her. Then one morning, I woke to a letter taped to my door. No stamp. No envelope. No text warning it was coming. Just folded notebook paper. The same kind Grace and I used to pass each other across the dinner table when our parents were fighting about bills. It said, "Ivy, Mom's not doing well. She's been quiet since mediation, and she won't admit it, but I think it's guilt. Dad still pretends it never happened. He jokes about the lawyer phase, like it was a phase you had, like bangs or veganism. I know it's not your job to care. I know I'm the last person who should ask you for anything, but if you ever wanted to talk, really talk, I'd listen. I wouldn't explain it away. I'd just hear it. I know this is late, and probably not enough, but you were never invisible. I was just never ready to see you. Grace." I folded the note carefully, placed it in my drawer, and stared at it like it might catch fire. That night, I called Aunt Lisa. She had never been my go-to, but in the quiet, shifting aftermath of everything, she had become a safe point. "Got a letter from Grace," I said. "Oh? She says Mom's not doing well, that she feels guilty." Aunt Lisa was quiet for a while. Then, "Ivy, guilt isn't always a doorway. Sometimes it's a wall. Don't walk through it expecting a room. Sometimes there's nothing waiting on the other side." I closed my eyes. I don't know what I want anymore. Closure? A rewrite? An apology that doesn't feel like PR? "You don't need to want anything," she said. "You already took back your name. That was the real win." I didn't go see Grace, but I did write her back. Briefly, intentionally. "I believe you meant it, and that matters more than you know. But I still need distance. Not because I'm angry, but because I'm building a life where I'm not someone else's afterthought. I hope one day we can talk as equals, but I'm not there yet." The summer semester started. I picked up a research internship on campus. Part-time, low-paying, but deeply validating. One of the professors overseeing it was the same one who'd read my silence essay. He asked if I'd be willing to present it at a student symposium in the fall. I hesitated. It was personal, exposed, raw. He added gently, "You don't have to use names. You can fictionalize it. But the voice, it's honest. People need that more than ever." I said yes. A month later, the final installment of the repayment landed in my account. Sophia confirmed the legal file was closed, officially, but I didn't celebrate. Instead, I took $200 from it and bought a plane ticket to visit a college out of state, the one I had always wanted to see when I was 17 but never dared ask. No one knew I went. I didn't post it, didn't tag it. It was mine. Mine alone. On the flight back, I wrote a new version of the essay. Not about silence, but about reclamation, about how some wars don't end with explosions, but with whispered truths spoken out loud for the first time. About how healing isn't a sunrise, it's a mirror. Summer burned slower this year. The kind of slow that lets you notice everything. The way sweat collects along your collarbone. The way cicadas cry like they've been carrying the same secret for centuries. The way grief sometimes doesn't ache. It just hums, just enough to let you know it's still alive. Campus thinned out. Most students left after spring term, their internships waiting in new cities with skyline views. I stayed. By choice. The research gig paid little but gave me something I never thought I'd crave again, an identity not built from someone else's crisis. I was no one's hero, no one's doormat, no one's backup plan. I was Ivy. Just Ivy. And that finally felt like enough. One Thursday afternoon, I ran into someone I didn't expect. My mother. It was the farmer's market downtown, humid and crowded. She stood at the honey stall, alone, holding a jar of lavender-infused syrup, like it might collapse if she breathed wrong. She looked smaller than I remembered. She saw me. I didn't move. Neither did she. A beat. 2. Then she walked over. "Ivy," she said softly, voice barely audible over the buzz of shoppers. "You look... well." I nodded. "I am." She glanced down at her hands, then back at me. "I don't expect anything. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry. I didn't say that sooner." I tilted my head. "Proud of what?" "That you didn't disappear, even when we gave you every reason to." There it was. No excuses, no deflections, just the truth. And maybe it wasn't enough to rebuild anything. But it was something. I gave her a small nod. "Thank you," I said. Then I walked away. Because I still wasn't ready for lunch dates or holiday visits or empty invitations wrapped in guilt, but I could accept a truth when it stood unwrapped. Later that evening, Grace texted me. She must have heard. "Mom told me she saw you. She cried after. First time she cried without saying it was your fault." I stared at that message for a long time, then typed, "She's not the only one growing." Grace replied, "I hope one day we can start over. Not as siblings, just as people." I didn't respond, but I didn't block her either. That was a beginning. At the end of July, my professor emailed me again. "We want to feature your new essay as the keynote at the symposium. No pressure, but the committee was unanimous." I stared at the screen. Keynote? Me? I remembered 17-year-old Ivy, standing outside her sister's baby shower with a forgotten gift in her lap, and no idea how to speak her own name without flinching. And I smiled. The night before the symposium, I sat in the dorm's common area, printing my speech while other students buzzed about exams and weekend parties. One girl sat beside me, glancing at the pages as they slid from the printer. "Is This for the keynote? She asked. I heard you're the one who wrote that piece about family betrayal. I looked at her. She didn't ask with judgment, just curiosity. I nodded. Yeah, that's me. She smiled. I read it, twice. It made me call my sister for the first time in 2 years. My throat closed a little. Thanks, I said. But what I meant was, you have no idea how long I've waited to be heard. The morning of the symposium, I stood behind the podium and looked out over the crowd. They didn't know my parents. They didn't know Grace. They didn't know anything except the words I was about to give them. And this time, they were mine. Not borrowed. Not stolen. Not softened to protect someone else's feelings. Just mine. I cleared my throat and began. The room was silent after I finished reading. Not a heavy silence, not awkward. It was a silence that hung in the air like dew, gentle, full, reflective. Then applause. Not thunderous, but real. A kind that didn't feel polite or performative, but earned. I stepped away from the podium and back into myself. For the first time, I didn't shrink. I didn't scan the room for anyone's approval. I just stood there, grounded, seen. After the event, a professor from another department approached me. She looked maybe early 40s, soft voice, sharp eyes. That was powerful, she said. Not just because of what happened to you, but because of how you held it, spoke it, transformed it. I thanked her, and she handed me her card. Creative Nonfiction Fellowship opens this fall. I think you have something bigger to say. Something bigger. I left the symposium building into the blue of late afternoon light. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Grace. I watched the live stream. I knew it was about us, even without names. I was scared it would make me angry, but it didn't. It made me realize something. You didn't just survive. You outgrew the space we kept shrinking you into. And I hope someday, if the door is open, I can meet that version of you. Even if it's just to say sorry again, and mean it better. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed in deep. No tears, no ache, just a strange, warm calmness that felt like release. That night, I returned to my apartment. I took out the folder, the one with the letters, the documents, the bank records, and I burned it, not out of bitterness, out of closure. The war was over, not because they surrendered, but because I no longer needed to fight. Fall came. The trees turned rust and flame, and I walked the same campus paths I once traced with resentment and anger in my bones. Now I walked with purpose, with books under one arm and notebooks full of essays that were mine, the kind of mine no one could redistribute. Thanksgiving approached. I got a letter in the mail. It was a real card this time, handwritten, from my mother. Inside. We're not inviting you home out of expectation. We're just letting you know there will always be a seat for you, if and when you're ever ready. Not because you owe us, but because we owe you that much. No guilt, no bribes, just space. And for once, that felt like enough. I didn't go. Not yet. But I did call Aunt Lisa and spend the holiday at her house. We baked. We watched old movies. She gave me a necklace that used to belong to my grandmother. I saved this for you, she said. Not because it's valuable, but because I knew you'd treat it like it was. I almost cried. But I just hugged her instead. And when the pie came out of the oven, she raised a glass and said, "To Ivy, for teaching the rest of us how to unlearn silence." I laughed. I smiled. I believed her. Months later, my essay was published in a small, literary magazine. My name was printed across the top, Ivy Caroline Hale. Full. Unapologetic. The same name they once tried to shrink to Sweetie and Helper and Strong One. The same name they once erased from plans and decisions, and family photos. Now it was in ink. Now it belonged to me again.